There was a night when everything felt missing. You were lying there, staring at the ceiling, mentally listing everything you didn't have yet. The doors that hadn't opened, the money that hadn't come, the people who didn't stay, the version of your life that still hadn't arrived. Your chest felt tight. Your mind kept repeating the same lines. I'm behind. I'm late. I should be further by now. From your side, it looked like honesty. You were just facing reality. From heaven's side, something else was happening. Your heart had been slowly tuned to the frequency of lack. You weren't a bad person. You loved God. You tried to do your best. But somewhere along the way, comparison became your background noise. You scrolled and saw what others had. You listened to stories of sudden breakthroughs, instant success, miracle testimonies that didn't sound like your life. And a quiet thought settled in. Why not me? You carried that question into your days. You woke up with a sense of deficit, as if your life started each morning at a minus. Before you even thanked God for breath, your mind had already counted everything that was missing. From your side, it felt normal. Everyone complains. Everyone is stressed. But heaven heard the frequency of your heart, because every thought has a sound in the unseen. Not a literal noise, but a direction, a tone, a rhythm. And your inner rhythm had been shaped more by fear than by faith. You remember the way it affected your mood. You could be in a perfectly normal day, nothing catastrophic happening, and still feel a low-grade sadness humming underneath everything. You laughed with people but felt empty when you were alone. You got provision and still felt unsafe. You achieved small victories and immediately moved the goalposts so they didn't feel like victories at all. You didn't call it ingratitude, you just called it reality. But from heaven's side, your perspective was being robbed. Because while you were staring at all that had not yet arrived, God saw everything that had not been taken from you. The nights you slept under a roof you did not build alone. The meals you ate that you didn't know how close you were to not being able to afford. The accidents that almost happened but somehow didn't. The people who quietly stayed while you focused on the ones who left. You thought your life was empty. Heaven saw a table with more on it than you realized. There was a particular day that heaven remembers clearly. You woke up heavy again. The same spiral started. What I don't have, who I'm not, where I'm not. But in the middle of that swirl, something small cut through. Maybe it was the way sunlight came through your window. Maybe it was a child's laugh in another room. Maybe it was a message from someone who simply said, I'm glad you exist. For a brief second, your heart softened. You noticed something good instead of only what was missing. And somewhere inside, almost by accident, you whispered, thank you. It wasn't a loud prayer. There were no tears, no music, no hands in the air. But in the unseen, that tiny thank you sounded like a frequency shift, a thin beam of light breaking into a room that had grown used to the dark. From your side, it felt insignificant. Of course I'm thankful, you thought, and moved on with your day. From heaven's side, it was the beginning of a retuning, because gratitude is more than a polite word. It is a posture, a lens, a channel your heart chooses to listen through. And in that moment, for a breath, your focus moved from absence to presence. You still had questions, you still had bills, you still had unanswered prayers. But in that one instant, you acknowledged something good right in front of you that you did not create by yourself. Heaven heard that. God heard that. Not because he is insecure and needs compliments, but because gratitude is what happens when your heart finally notices that you are not alone, not abandoned, not as empty as your fears insist. That one thank you did not fix everything. It did not erase your problems, but it cracked the surface of a hardened perspective. It broke even slightly the spell of never enough, and heaven leaned closer. Because when your heart even slightly turns from lack toward remembrance, from I never have toward I do have this, you begin to tune to a different frequency. Not the frequency of denial, pretending life is perfect, but the frequency of truth. The truth that even here, even now, God has not left you empty-handed. You did not know it yet, But that small thank you was more powerful than 1,000 complaints. Because complaint trains your heart to see what is missing until you can no longer recognize what has been given. Gratitude does the opposite. It does not lie about the pain. It does not erase the struggle. It simply refuses to let the struggle be the only story. There was a time when your morning started with a scroll instead of a prayer. You opened your eyes, opened your screen, and let other people's lives set the tone of your heart. Vacations you weren't on, relationships you didn't have, bodies you didn't see in the mirror, homes you didn't live in. You were not trying to be ungrateful. You were just absorbing an endless stream of more while your soul quietly sank deeper into not enough. From your side, it felt like normal life. From heaven's side, it was a spiritual frequency slowly shaping the way you saw God, yourself, and your future. Because when lack becomes your lens, even the blessings in your hands start to look small. The roof becomes just this place. The job becomes just this salary. The body that carries you through every day becomes just this face, just this weight, just this problem. You began to treat ordinary mercies as if they were owed, not gifted. Breath, clarity of mind, another sunrise you didn't pay for. You rarely thanked God for those, not because you are ungrateful by nature, but because familiarity had numbed you. Yet heaven never stopped noticing. Every morning when your lungs filled with air, heaven saw a miracle. Every step your legs took, every time your heart beat without you telling it to, every time your mind processed 1,000 small decisions in a day, heaven saw. Your life was swimming in mercies you did not earn, sustained by a God you often felt distant from, but who never moved his eyes from you. And still, he did not shame you for not seeing it. He waited for the day when your heart would be too tired of bitterness to keep pretending that nothing good ever reached you. That day came quietly. You didn't wake up and decide, I will be a grateful person now. It was smaller than that. You were washing dishes, or walking somewhere, or sitting with a simple meal, and a thought slipped in. I didn't always have this. Maybe it was the place you live, the person beside you, the job that once was just a prayer, the fact that you survived things that should have broken you. For a moment, you saw your present not through the eyes of disappointment, but through the eyes of the you who once begged God for exactly this. And again, almost without planning it, you whispered, "Thank you." Heaven heard that too. Because gratitude doesn't begin with the big, shining moments when everything is obviously miraculous. It begins in the quiet decision to stop treating daily bread like background noise. You still had unanswered prayers. You still had questions about the timing of God. You still had wounds that did not close overnight. Gratitude did not require you to pretend those things weren't real. It simply invited you to place them next to what is also real. The fact that God has again and again met you in ways you did not deserve, did not expect, and did not always notice. You remember the verse, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits." Forget not, because the human heart forgets fast. Pain prints deeply. Breakthroughs fade quickly. You can receive an answer to prayer on Monday and by Friday be back in the mindset of, God never does anything for me. Heaven hears that frequency too, not to condemn you, but to show you how much of your suffering comes from the story you tell yourself about your own life. So God began to invite you into a different story. What if, instead of waking up and starting with what I lack, you began with where has God held me, not as a performance, not as a checklist, but as a daily retuning. You did not get it right every day. Some mornings, the old soundtrack of complaint still played on repeat. You woke up heavy, grabbed your phone, ran straight back into comparison. Heaven did not abandon you on those days. Instead, he kept placing small windows of remembrance in your path. An old picture that reminded you how far you've come. A scar on your body that once terrified you, but now is proof that you healed. A person who said, I'm grateful for you, on a day when you felt invisible. Every one of those moments was an invitation, not a demand. an invitation to pause for a breath and say, "Thank you for this." Even if so much still feels unresolved, this right here is a kindness I don't want to ignore. That is how the frequency of gratitude grows, not by pretending you have no pain, but by refusing to let pain erase the evidence of God's goodness already written all over your story. You thought you needed a major miracle to feel thankful. Heaven knew you needed something different first. Eyes to see that even in the middle of waiting, you are already surrounded by quiet miracles you've been stepping over just to stare at what hasn't arrived yet. There was a day that did not look special to anyone else, but heaven saw it differently. You woke up with the same weight in your chest, the same list in your mind, the same familiar ache of, "I wish things were different." But something small shifted. Instead of reaching for your phone first, you sat on the edge of your bed for just a moment longer. You noticed the quiet, you noticed your own breathing, and almost timidly, you whispered, "God, thank you that I woke up. I don't feel great today, but I'm here." It didn't feel spiritual, it didn't feel powerful. If anyone had watched you, they might have thought nothing happened. But in the unseen, your heart had just tugged on a different thread. From your side, it was a small start. From heaven's side, it was a recalibration. You went about your day. Traffic, tasks, messages, all the usual noise. You still felt stress. You still felt pressure. Life did not suddenly become easy. But 3 or 4 times that day, you caught yourself. You caught the old sentence forming, "This always goes wrong for me." And even if your tone was tired, you answered it with, "Actually, not always. There were days it went right. Thank you for those days." You caught yourself about to say, "I have nothing," and instead you looked around, at your shoes, at your keys, at the place you walked into, and you said quietly, "I do have something. Thank you for at least this." It felt awkward. It felt almost forced, not because you were lying, but because your tongue had been trained for so long to speak the language of lack that the language of gratitude felt foreign in your mouth. Heaven understood that. Grace did not roll its eyes at your clumsy attempts. God was not waiting for perfect poetry. He was listening for direction, the direction of your focus, the tilt of your heart. And that day, for more moments than usual, your attention leaned away from never enough toward, "There is at least something here." You may not have felt a big inner explosion, but did you notice how the day landed? How instead of ending in the same deep pit, you finished just a little higher on the inside? Maybe you fell asleep a tiny bit lighter. Maybe your shoulders weren't as tight. Maybe you smiled once or twice at simple things you normally ignore. From your side, it felt like a slightly less heavy day. From heaven's side, it was training. Because gratitude is not just an emotion you wait to feel. It is a muscle, a discipline of perception, a way of teaching your heart to recognize God in places your fear only saw risk and lack. You did not become a different person overnight. There were days after that when you slipped right back into old patterns. Days when you complained freely, forgot everything you'd been learning, and ended the night feeling angry, overlooked, empty again. You felt guilty then. You thought, "I guess this gratitude thing was just a phase. I'm not built for this." But heaven did not see failure. Heaven saw a journey. Think about how children learn to walk. They stand, wobble, fall over and over again. No one looks at a toddler on the ground and says, "You'll never walk, you fell again." Instead, everyone smiles, reaches out a hand and says, "Up you go, try again." Your heart learning gratitude is not much different. You will wobble between old narratives and new ones. You will fall into complaints some days. You will forget to notice blessings you noticed just yesterday. God is not pacing in heaven with crossed arms, keeping score. He is the one reaching down his hand, whispering, "Up you go, let's try again. Look, can you see even one good thing here with me?" Little by little, this begins to change the way you read your own life. You start to remember the times God came through when you were sure he wouldn't. The night you didn't know how a bill would be paid, and then, unexpectedly, something shifted. The season you thought your heart would never heal, and yet, somehow, you are not the same kind of broken you once were. You begin to replay those memories not as accidents, not as coincidences, but as evidence. Evidence that your story has never been completely godless, even in the chapters where you felt most alone. This does something inside your nervous system. Fear has told you for years, nothing ever works out for you. You're always the one left behind. The next bad thing is coming. Gratitude quietly answers, that's not entirely true. There were times it did work. There were times I was held. There were days I was carried through situations I did not have the strength to survive on my own. That is how the inner frequency shifts, not by pretending there is no darkness, but by refusing to erase all the light that has also been there. From your side, you might think, I'm just remembering good things. From heaven's side, you are building an altar, not of stone, but of memory. Every thank you placed over a moment becomes a marker in your heart. In this place, God was with me. In this moment, I was not forsaken. Later, when fear tries to return, when lack tries to shout louder, those markers will stand and speak back. They will remind you that your life is not just a string of disappointments, but also a trail of mercies you cannot fully explain. And as you keep practicing, something even deeper begins. You start to feel grateful, not only for what you received, but for what you were protected from. The relationship that ended before it crushed you. The job you didn't get that would have drained your soul. The path that closed so another, quieter one could open. Gratitude starts to look not just backward at what came, but backward at what never came. The disasters that almost were, but were stopped by a hand you could not see. And in that awareness, your heart slowly tunes to a new frequency, where "why doesn't anything good ever happen to me?" begins to lose its grip, and a softer, truer question takes its place. How many times has God already been good to me, and I just didn't see it until now? There was a moment when scripture you had heard 100 times suddenly sounded different. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits. Before, it was just a verse. Words you'd heard in church, sung in songs, printed on images, but now, after walking through your own drought of gratitude, it started to feel like a gentle command to your scattered heart. Hey, soul, don't forget, because forgetting had become a habit. You remembered every injustice. You remembered every no. You remembered every door that closed, every betrayal, every loss. Your mind replayed those scenes with painful clarity. But the times you were carried, rescued, provided for, comforted, those faded faster. Not because they were small, but because pain shouts and mercy often whispers. So the Spirit began to teach you how to talk to your own soul. Not with harshness, not with "you should be more grateful" condemnation, with invitations. You'd feel your heart sliding into that old spiral. Nothing works, nothing changes, nothing ever comes. And instead of letting it run unchecked, you started to answer it. Wait. Soul, remember. Remember the night you thought you wouldn't make it, and somehow you did. Remember the person who came at the exact moment you needed someone to listen. Remember the way a door opened from a direction you weren't even looking at. You talked to yourself differently. You were not gaslighting your own pain. You were not saying, "It wasn't that bad." You were saying, "It was bad, and God was still there." That "and" is part of the frequency of gratitude. It refuses to erase one side of reality, but insists on including the other side as well. You started to notice how this changed your reactions. Before, a small inconvenience could ruin your whole day. A delayed message, a minor financial surprise, a plan that shifted. Your heart, already tuned to the station of never enough, took every small disruption as confirmation that God was distant, that life was unfair, that you were forgotten. Now you were not suddenly perfect or calm, but something in you gave God the benefit of the doubt a little more often. Instead of course this happened to me, you caught yourself thinking, "I don't like this, but I've seen enough to know this might not be the full story." You didn't always say it out loud. Sometimes it was just a quiet shift in the background of your thoughts. But heaven heard it, because that small shift from accusation to openness is huge in the unseen. It is the difference between a heart closed off to any possibility of good and a heart cracked open just enough for light to get in. Gratitude does that. It keeps the door of your heart from slamming shut in the face of God every time life stings. It doesn't deny the sting. It just refuses to let hurt become your only interpreter. There were days when you practiced this and still felt numb. You said thank you and felt nothing. You remembered good things and still felt sad. You chose gratitude and still wrestled with anxiety and fear. You wondered, is this even working? From heaven's side it was. Because the frequency of a heart does not shift in one emotional moment. It shifts in repeated decisions to direct your attention toward God's faithfulness, even when your feelings lag behind. You began to realize that gratitude is not a mood you wait for. It is a choice you make and a story you tell yourself about your own life. When your mind said, "I'm always alone," you chose to remember, actually, I wasn't alone that time, or that night I thought I'd fall apart, and somehow I didn't. When your heart said, God never answers me, you chose to remember, maybe not in the ways I expect or at the speed I prefer, but there were answers, there were doors, there were ways made where I saw none. It was not denial, it was correction. You were correcting a story of absolute absence, with real moments of presence you had previously dismissed. And as you did, the atmosphere inside you began to respond. It didn't mean you never felt low again. It meant that in your lows, you were no longer completely defenseless. You had anchors, memories marked with thank you, days labeled with he was here, moments you could point back to and say, if he was faithful then, it is not logical to assume he has abandoned me now. Gratitude gave you an argument against despair, not a fake smile, not a quick verse thrown over deep wounds, a grounded case built from your own history with God, a history you were finally paying attention to. And slowly, you noticed something else. Gratitude started to show up not only in how you talked to God, but in how you talked to people. You found yourself saying, thank you for being here more often. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying. Thank you for this small kindness. Those words didn't just bless them, they shaped you. Because every time you acknowledged goodness in another person, you trained your own heart to stop scanning only for threat and to recognize gifts in human form too. The frequency of gratitude is not just vertical, it is horizontal. It changes how you see God. It changes how you see yourself. It changes how you see others. From your side, it might still feel like small, fragile practice. From heaven's side, it is the slow, beautiful work of a heart being retuned. From the harsh, cold station of never enough to the quiet, steady signal that says, again and again, even here, even now, God has given me more than my fear wants me to see. There came a day when gratitude stopped being just a word and started becoming a way you moved through your own life. It didn't look religious. It didn't look dramatic. It looked like small choices in very ordinary moments. You were making coffee, mind drifting toward the usual worries, the bill, the delay, the thing that hasn't happened yet. But instead of letting your thoughts ride that wave all the way into anxiety, you paused. You watched the steam rise, you felt the warmth in your hands, and you said, almost quietly, thank you that I can stand here, right now, with this simple cup in my hand. It sounded too small to matter. But heaven heard it as alignment, because gratitude does not always sound like, I'm thankful for big miracles. Sometimes it sounds like, I'm thankful I made it to this morning. I'm thankful I'm still here to see what you will do next. You began to sprinkle those words through your day like seeds. Thank you that I got home safely. Thank you that I had food today. Thank you that I have at least one person who cares if I'm okay. Thank you that even on days I feel numb, you have not stopped watching over me. From your side, it felt like a gentle discipline. From heaven's side, it was a reprogramming. because for years your mind had rehearsed disaster and deficiency. What if it all goes wrong? What if I'm always behind? What if nothing ever changes? Those sentences had carved deep grooves in your thoughts. Now each thank you was like water slowly softening hard ground, like a new path being cut through an overgrown forest. At first, it felt unnatural. You had rehearsed worry for so long that peace felt suspicious. You had listened to fear for so long that hope felt naive. But as days turned into weeks, you started to notice something subtle. Your first instinct in a problem began to shift. Before, your reflex was, this will ruin everything. Now, even if your emotions flared up the same way, there was a second thought right behind the fear. Wait, I've seen God make a way before. I don't know how, but I'm choosing to thank Him that He's here in this too. You were not thanking God for pain itself. You were thanking Him for His presence in the pain, for His character that doesn't change with your circumstances. That kind of gratitude is not blind positivity. It is faith. Faith that God is still God when the numbers don't add up. Faith that God is still good when the timing hurts. Faith that God is still near when your feelings say otherwise. And faith has a sound in heaven. It sounds like a heart that refuses to let the visible be the only evidence. You also noticed how gratitude started to change the way you spoke about yourself. You used to look in the mirror and only see deficits. What you are not, what you don't have, what you haven't achieved. Now on some days, you found yourself saying, thank you, God, that I survived enough to still be here. Thank you for the mind I have, even if it battles thoughts. Thank you for this body, even if it carries scars. Thank you that I am not who I used to be. You weren't glorifying your flaws. You were refusing to curse the very vessel God chose to inhabit with His presence. Your body stopped being only a project to fix and slowly became a gift to steward. You still had goals. You still wanted change, but gratitude allowed you to pursue growth from a place of love, not hatred. Thank you that I'm worth taking care of, you began to think, even if you didn't always feel it. Heaven smiled at that. Because for so long you had poured kindness onto everyone else and left yourself out in the cold. Gratitude brought you in from the edges. It reminded you that you too are part of the good God has placed in your life, not because you are perfect, but because you are His. You also saw gratitude change how you viewed your past. There were seasons you only remembered by their pain, the breakup, the job loss, the betrayal, the long months where nothing seemed to move. You never had to rename them as pleasant. You never had to pretend they didn't wound you, but you began to notice what those seasons also gave you. Strength you didn't know you had. Compassion for people you would have judged before. Clarity about what you truly value. A deeper awareness of how desperately you need God. So you started to say something you never imagined you would say. God, I don't thank you for every circumstance, but I thank you for what you somehow worked inside me through it. That kind of gratitude is not cheap. It is born in the furnace. It rises from ashes that you thought would always choke you. And when heaven hears that, it rings with a deep, weighty sound, the sound of a heart that has looked at darkness and still chosen to recognize light. You did not get to this place by accident. You got here through 1,000 small, sometimes shaky, thank yous in kitchens, in cars, in showers, in hospital rooms, in long walks and silent nights. Each one mattered. Each one turned your face 1 degree at a time away from constant lack and toward the God who has been weaving mercy into every chapter, even the ones you would never have chosen for yourself. And in that slow turning, something else opened. Space. Space in your mind that used to be filled only with worry, now making room for ideas, for creativity, for solutions you couldn't see when you were drowning in never enough. A space in your relationships to express thanks, to encourage, to actually enjoy the people who stayed instead of obsessing over the ones who left. Space in your soul to hear God not only as the one who corrects you, but as the one who delights in your smallest, sincere thank you. I see this, I know this was you. That is the frequency of gratitude taking root. Not loud, not flashy, but steady. a quiet, growing awareness that no matter how much is still unresolved, you are walking through a life where God has not been absent. And every time you notice even one thread of His goodness and name it with thanks, your heart comes a little more into tune with heaven's song. There came a point when gratitude started to change not just how you felt, but what you noticed. You began to realize that whatever you focus on grows in your awareness. When you focused on lack, lack filled the room. When you focused on fear, fear colored every conversation. When you focused on everything that wasn't working, even the things that seemed small and fragile. Now, as you slowly chose gratitude, your inner attention shifted. You walked into the same spaces you had always walked into, but they didn't look exactly the same. You noticed the smile you used to overlook. You noticed the quiet loyalty of someone who kept showing up. You noticed small provisions, a discount, an unexpected ride, a simple "I thought of you" message that might have blended into the background before. From your side, it felt like you were simply paying more attention. From heaven's side, your heart was tuning to a new frequency, because gratitude does more than make you nicer. It sharpens your perception of where God is already moving. Think of Jesus, standing before thousands with almost nothing in His hands, a few loaves, a few fish. From a human perspective, it was laughably insufficient. The math didn't work. He could have focused on the lack. Too little, too late, not enough. But He lifted what He had and gave thanks. He thanked the Father before the multiplication, not after. Gratitude came in the scarcity, not just in the abundance. And then, in His hands, the not enough became more than enough. You've heard that story before, but maybe now it lands differently. Because you know what it's like to look at your own few loaves, your small income, your limited energy, your fragile heart, your simple skills, and feel the weight of "this will never feed what life is demanding of me." Gratitude does not deny that feeling. It simply shifts the focus from what is missing in your hands to the one whose hands are over yours. When you say, "Thank you for what I do have," you are placing your little in God's larger story. From your side, it still looks small. But in the unseen, something is always multiplied when gratitude meets surrender. Sometimes it is resources, sometimes it is opportunities, sometimes it is peace, clarity, or resilience. You may not always see the miracle of loaves and fish in your bank account, but you will begin to see the miracle of enough in your soul, enough strength for this day, enough wisdom for this decision, enough hope to get out of bed one more morning. And slowly you stop saying, "I can't do this at all," and start saying, I can't do this without you, but with you, I have enough for today." That is gratitude speaking. You also began to notice how gratitude is deeply connected to trust. Because when you look back and thank God for where He has carried you, it becomes harder to believe the lie that He will abandon you in what is ahead. Your memories become more than pain. They become testimonies. You think of the night you feared would break you, and you are still here. You think of the season that felt like the end, and yet somehow it became a doorway to something new. When you thank Him for those chapters, even through tears, you are not glorifying the struggle. You are glorifying His faithfulness inside it, and that changes how you walk into new storms. You no longer step in with only, "This will destroy me." Part of you now whispers, "I don't know how this will work out, but I remember it wasn't the end last time either. Thank you, God, that you will be with me here the same way you were with me there." That kind of gratitude is like armor around your mind. Fear still knocks, but it doesn't get the final word as easily. Anxious thoughts still attempt to spiral, but they are interrupted by flashes of memory where God came through in ways you couldn't see coming. Gratitude begins to say, "This situation is scary, but it is not the whole story." Heaven loves that sound. Not because God needs your compliments, but because He wants your heart anchored in truth rather than dragged by lies. You also saw how gratitude started to soften the edge of your prayers. Before, your prayers were often driven only by desperation. Fix this, change that, give me what I don't have. There is nothing wrong with bringing needs to God. He invites you to. But now, your prayers began to also include, thank you for what you've already done. Thank you that I'm not praying to a stranger, but to the same God who met me in other storms. It doesn't make you passive. It makes you anchored. You still ask boldly. You still knock. You still seek. But you are no longer approaching heaven as if it has never helped you before. Gratitude reminds you that you are not starting from zero with God. There is a history between you. And that history is filled with more mercy than you had been willing to admit. So when you say thank you, you are not just being polite. You are picking up the thread of a long relationship and saying, I remember that you have been good to me. I choose to see it. I choose not to erase it just because I'm in pain today. From your side, this might still feel like quiet inner work, invisible, unspectacular. From heaven's side, it is a bright, clear signal, a heart being tuned to the positive frequency of trust and remembrance, not in a vague, good vibes way, but in a deeply rooted biblical way. The kind of gratitude that looks at a desert and still says, I remember the water he gave me last time, so I refuse to believe I am abandoned here. There came a time when gratitude didn't just change how you saw your life. It began to change how your life felt to the people around you. Before, your atmosphere was heavy even when you smiled. You carried tension like armor. You stepped into rooms already braced for disappointment. Your words often echoed what your fears were saying, not what your faith believed. You didn't mean to, but sometimes your presence quietly preached a sermon of scarcity. There's never enough. Good things don't last. Everything is hard for me. People could feel it. Not because you were bad, but because you were tired, and your tiredness had become the loudest frequency in the room. Now, with gratitude slowly growing in you, something shifted, not overnight, not in a way that erased your humanity, but there were moments when your mouth surprised even you. You found yourself saying, I'm grateful I learned from that. I'm thankful that at least this part worked. I don't understand everything, but God has been good to me in ways I didn't see before. You weren't forcing positivity. You were voicing reality from a wider angle. People noticed. They saw that you still had problems, but you carried them differently. They heard your honesty about pain, but they also heard you call out goodness in the middle of it. And that combination, truth plus gratitude, felt like oxygen. Because the world is full of two extremes, denial that pretends everything is fine, and despair that insists nothing will ever be. You began to walk a third path. You didn't deny the storm, but you also didn't deny the hand holding you in it. That is rare, and rare things carry a strong frequency. You started to notice how gratitude softened you. The same drivers, the same lines, the same slow cashiers, the same small irritations, they were still there. But you found yourself a little less explosive, a little less sharp, because instead of seeing every inconvenience as proof that life is against you, you began to see them as interruptions in a day that is still full of gifts. You might grumble for a moment, then catch yourself and think, at least I'm safe, at least I'm here, at least I have somewhere to get to. That, at least, was not resignation. It was gratitude pulling your focus back from the edge of frustration to the foundation of blessing. You also saw how gratitude made generosity easier. Before, giving felt like loss. Time, attention, money, kindness. Every act of generosity felt like something being taken from you. Because your heart believed there would never be enough, you clung tightly even to what hurt you to hold. Now, as gratitude reminded you of all you had received, your grip loosened. You remembered how God had placed people in your life at just the right moments. You remembered the meals shared, the advice given, the opportunities that came from someone else's yes. So when you had the chance to be that for someone else, gratitude whispered, you are not giving from emptiness, you are passing on what was first given to you. Generosity stopped feeling like a threat to your survival, and started feeling like a natural overflow, you didn't start throwing everything away. Wisdom still mattered, but you noticed that when you helped, when you encouraged, when you shared, your heart didn't shrink in fear. It expanded. Because gratitude knows that the source is not your bank account, your schedule, or your own strength. The source is God, and when you remember that, you stop living with clenched fists and learn to live with open hands. Open to receive, open to give, open to let go when God says, "This season is over. Trust me with what's next." Gratitude also began to heal something deeper in you: bitterness. Bitterness had told you for a long time, nothing good ever stays. People always leave. You'll always get the short end of the deal. It pointed to real wounds. It had evidence. It had stories. Gratitude did not argue with the existence of those wounds. It did something else. It pointed to other evidence: the friends who did stay, the doors that did open, the moments you were shown mercy you didn't earn. It did not tell you to trust unsafe people again. It did not tell you to pretend betrayal didn't hurt. It simply reminded you that your whole life cannot be summarized by "everyone leaves and nothing good ever happens." And as gratitude presented its case, bitterness began to lose its authority. It still knocked. It still tried to narrate situations with its old script. But now you had another voice inside you. Wait. That's not completely true anymore. I have seen goodness. I have seen faithfulness. I have seen God turn things I hated into growth I cherish. That shift is part of the positive frequency heaven had been tuning you to. Not a frequency of naive optimism, but of anchored hope, where you can say, with full honesty, "I have suffered, and I have also been sustained. I have known loss, and I have also known unexpected kindness. I have walked through seasons I never want to relive, and yet, even there, God was doing something in me that I can now thank Him for." From your side, you might not feel like some glowing, always smiling person. You will still have days when you are quiet, days when you wrestle, days when gratitude feels like a choice more than a feeling. But heaven sees how far your heart has come. From constant complaint to conscious thanks, from numbness to slow awareness, from scarcity to a budding trust that the God who carried you this far will not suddenly let you fall. And every time you choose to say, "Thank you," right here, right now, you send out a signal, a quiet, steady frequency that says to heaven and to your own soul, "I will not let fear be my only narrator anymore. I choose to remember that I am living a life where grace shows up, sometimes loudly, sometimes quietly, but always more than I thought, when all I could see was what I lacked." There was a moment when you realized gratitude was not just changing how you looked back, it was also changing how you looked forward. Before, your future felt like a hallway lined with worst-case scenarios. Every new opportunity came wrapped in dread. Every change felt like a setup for disappointment. Your imagination worked overtime, creating detailed pictures of what could go wrong, but almost never of what could go right. You called it being realistic. From heaven's side, it was your heart rehearsing defeat in advance, a constant frequency of fear and scarcity broadcasting into your tomorrow. But as gratitude grew, you started to see that the same imagination that had been used to build elaborate stories of ruin could also be used to remember faithfulness and anticipate grace. You began to ask yourself a new kind of question. If God has carried me this far, why am I only picturing abandonment ahead? It wasn't instant. You didn't suddenly picture a perfect life, but in small ways, you noticed your inner movies changing. You would think about a conversation you dreaded, and instead of only imagining rejection or conflict, you allowed one frame, even just one, where the outcome was peace, understanding, or at least the sense that you would not be alone in it. You thought about a step of obedience God was asking you to take, and instead of only seeing loss and risk, you let your heart consider, what if there is goodness on the other side of this surrender that I can't see yet? That what if used to belong only to fear. What if it all fails? What if they leave? What if nothing changes? Now, gratitude gently borrowed that phrase and turned it toward hope. What if God is already in my tomorrow, lining up mercies I haven't reached yet? This didn't mean you stopped preparing. You still took precautions. You still used wisdom. You still honored the reality of risk in this world. But you no longer let fear be the only voice that used your imagination. Gratitude gave faith a seat at the table. You also noticed how gratitude changed your relationship with time. Before, you lived under the tyranny of too late. Too late to start over. Too late to heal. Too late to build. Too late to become. Every delay felt like proof that you had missed your only chance. But gratitude took you by the hand and walked you back through your story, showing you moments when something felt late, and yet, in hindsight, the timing was precise. The open door that wouldn't have been safe if it had come earlier. The person you met only because another plan failed. The opportunity that arrived after a long wait and fit better than anything you had begged for in the rush. As you thanked God for those late but right moments, your inner clock began to relax. You started to say, I don't understand this delay, but I remember I've been here before and it wasn't the end of my story. That remembrance softened the panic that used to rise in you when things didn't move at your preferred pace. You learned that gratitude and trust are deeply intertwined. Every sincere thank you for what has been becomes a quiet, I trust you for what will be. You might not voice it perfectly, but heaven hears it. Because when you stand in your present and look back with gratitude, you are doing more than reminiscing. You are building a bridge between he was faithful then and he will be faithful again. That bridge is what your future self will walk on when the next storm comes. Gratitude also began to change what you pursued. Before, you chased things mostly to fill an inner emptiness. Achievements to prove your worth, people to silence your loneliness, possessions to cover your sense of inadequacy. You were trying to fix an internal deficit with external additions. But as gratitude slowly convinced your heart that you were not starting from zero, that God had already poured goodness into your life, your pursuit shifted. You stopped chasing what looked impressive but didn't fit your soul. You stopped forcing yourself into spaces that demanded you ignore your limits and your values. You began to look for what aligned with the peace and thankfulness God was cultivating inside you. Does this opportunity support the person God is shaping me to be? You started to ask. Or does it pull me back into the old rhythm of hurry, fear, and never enough? Gratitude made it easier to say no to things that were wrong for you because it reminded you were not desperate. Desperate hearts grab anything. Grateful hearts can wait, not because waiting is fun, but because gratitude testifies that God has already done enough in your story to prove that He is not withholding good out of cruelty. You also sensed how gratitude brought you closer to the heart of God, not in a transactional way. I say thank you, so you give me more, but in a relational way. When you thanked Him for small things, you were really saying, I see you here. I see your kindness in this smile, in this meal, in this moment of rest, in this unexpected help. And like any father who loves to be known not just for his power, but for his character, God drew close to that recognition. You began to feel His presence not only in crisis, but in the quiet, in the way light came through the window, in the way laughter broke tension in a room, in the way peace settled on you for no obvious reason. You may have thought, I'm just calmer today, but heaven knew your heart was spending more time tuned to appreciation than accusation, and that tuning makes you more aware of a presence that has been with you all along. From the outside, your life might still look very similar. Same job, same city, same responsibilities. But inside, a deep reorientation was underway. You were no longer walking through your days with a script that said, nothing good ever happens to me. I'm always behind. God is far. You were learning to walk with a quieter, truer script. Goodness has followed me more than I realized. I am not as empty as my fears told me. God has been nearer than my pain allowed me to see. And as that script took root, you stepped more fully into the positive, Christ-centered frequency you were created for. Not a life where everything goes your way, but a life where no matter what comes, you have trained your heart to look for God's hand, to name His mercy, and to say, even trembling, "Thank you that I am not walking through this alone." There was a point when you began to realize that gratitude was quietly healing places in you didn't even know were broken. Not just your mood, not just your thoughts, your relationships, your sense of identity, even the way you handled money, opportunities, and success. Before, you carried a deep, unspoken belief. I will never really have enough. I'm always one step away from losing everything. That belief shaped your behavior. You held on to people even when they were hurting you because you were afraid no one better would come. You clung to jobs and situations that crushed your soul because you didn't believe God could provide another path. You said yes to almost anything that promised security, even if it cost you your peace. From your side, it looked like responsibility. From heaven's side, it was fear disguised as wisdom. As gratitude grew, that fear started to lose its power over you. Because gratitude kept reminding you of a simple, dangerous truth: you have not been kept alive by your own grip. You have been carried by a God who has provided for you in seasons when you had nothing to offer back. When you thanked Him for nights He got you through, you were also admitting, "I did not keep myself." That admission began to loosen the knot of control in your chest. If He has sustained you this far, through all the mistakes, through all the blind decisions, through all the times you ran on empty, what makes it logical to believe He will suddenly abandon you now that you are actually seeking Him more? Gratitude quietly argued against the lie of sudden divine abandonment, not with fancy theology, but with lived evidence. And as that lie weakened, you stopped living as if you had to hoard every opportunity, every coin, every moment of affection, or you would be doomed. You noticed it in how you responded to open doors. Before, any door felt like the only door. So I better take it, no matter what it cost me. Now you could look at an open door and actually ask, is this from God, or is this fear trying to dress up as a blessing? Because gratitude had already shown you that God can surprise you, that not every good thing in your life came from your hustle. Some came from grace you did not schedule, so you didn't cling as hard to the doors that didn't carry His peace. You began to believe, even if just a little, if this isn't right for me, I do not have to strangle it to feel safe. The same God who gave me good things before knows how to give again. That's a different frequency. You saw it too in how you related to people. Before, you were quick to catalog the ways they failed you, who forgot, who didn't call, who didn't show up the way you hoped. You kept mental lists of disappointments, and yes, some of that was real hurt that deserved to be felt. But gratitude began to highlight another list. Who stayed, who did try, who did show up in their imperfect human way. You started to notice small acts of love you used to dismiss. The friend who checked on you even when you didn't answer right away. The family member who kept praying for you without posting it anywhere. The person who sent a small gift, a small word, a small gesture that meant more than they knew. And you found yourself saying, "Thank you, God, for this person, for this effort, for this thread of kindness woven into my story." That did not erase the pain others caused. It did not magically fix every broken relationship, but it protected your heart from becoming completely hard. Because gratitude held open a window for love to still breathe, even in a world where people sometimes wound you. It also started to heal the way you saw yourself. You had spent years mentally punishing yourself for what you were not successful enough, not spiritual enough, not healed enough, not disciplined enough. You saw your life as a long list of not enough. Gratitude began to gently interrupt that narrative. When you thanked God for what He had brought you through, you were also acknowledging that you have grown, that you have changed, that you have survived things many did not. You started to say things like, "Thank you that I am not who I was. Thank you for the strength you put in me. Thank you that I kept going when I wanted to quit." You weren't praising yourself. You were recognizing His work in you. And in doing that, you began to see yourself a little more the way He does, not as a constant failure, but as a work in progress that He refuses to abandon. Even the way you viewed financial provision began to shift. Before, money was only a source of anxiety. No matter how much came, it never felt like enough. You lived with the constant sense of one wrong thing and it all collapses. Gratitude did not make your bills disappear. But as you started to thank God for every little way He had provided before, the unexpected help, the favor you didn't earn, the job that came when you were desperate, your heart moved from "I am on my own" to "I am being carried by someone who knows I need daily bread." Provision still mattered, planning still mattered, but panic was no longer the only voice in the room, because gratitude kept whispering, "Look at the history. Has He not given you enough light for each step so far?" You saw that prosperity in heaven's language is not just a big number. It is a heart that knows how to say, "I have what I need for this season, and when I don't, I know who to go to." And that heart, grateful rather than grasping, is ready to handle more without being destroyed by it. From your side, you might still feel like you're learning, stumbling, forgetting some days and remembering on others. But from heaven's side, your frequency is undeniably different. Where once your story was dominated by "I never have, I never am, I never will," now there is a deeper, truer song rising in you. "I have been held, I am being shaped, I will not be abandoned." And that song, even when sung quietly, even when whispered through tears, is already pulling your life into a new rhythm, where gratitude is not an occasional reaction, but the steady undercurrent of a heart that finally knows it has never, not once, walked alone. There will come a day when you look back on this chapter and realize something profound. You did not just learn to say thank you, but you were rescued from a way of seeing life that was quietly stealing your joy, your hope, and your ability to recognize God. You were rescued from the frequency of lack. For a long time, your inner soundtrack said, "I never have enough. Nothing ever works for me. God is late, God is distant, God is silent." Those words didn't just describe your feelings. They shaped them. They shaped what you noticed, what you expected, what you believed. But heaven never agreed with that narrative. God saw every kindness that reached you on days you felt unseen. He saw every protection you didn't know you needed. He saw every open door you walked through and called normal, even though someone somewhere was praying for exactly what you were living. He did not shame you for missing those things. He understood how pain narrows the view, how trauma teaches you to scan only for danger, how disappointment can make goodness feel like a trick. So He did not start by demanding joy. He started by inviting remembrance. Forget not all His benefits, not because you owe God emotional perfection, but because your soul cannot thrive on a diet of only what has gone wrong. Gratitude brought that truth back into the room. At first, it sounded like a whisper. "Thank you that I woke up. Thank you that I made it home. Thank you that I'm not who I was. Thank you that you carried me through that season I thought would end me." Small phrases, quiet moments, no fireworks. But in the unseen, each one was a turning of your inner face toward the light. You did not stop feeling pain. You did not stop having needs. You did not stop walking through hard days. What changed was that your heart stopped giving hurt the right to tell the whole story. Now you hold both. You can say, "This was deeply painful, and God was still there with me." You can say, "I don't have everything I want, and I refuse to ignore the goodness I do have." You can say, "I don't know how this will work out, and I remember it wasn't the end last time either." This is not denial. This is spiritual clarity. This is your heart tuning to the frequency of gratitude, not a shallow, just be happy noise, but a deep, Christ-centered recognition that mercy has been present far more often than your fear admits. And as you walk forward, this frequency will guard you. When fear tries to say, "Nothing good ever lasts," gratitude will answer, "There were good gifts that carried me for years." When comparison whispers you are always behind, gratitude will say, God has led me on a path that was mine, not theirs, and he has not failed to meet me on it. When scarcity insists, you can't afford to be generous, you can't afford to rest, you can't afford to trust, gratitude will quietly remind you, I did not bring myself this far. I'm not supported only by what I can see, I am held by a faithful God who has already provided in more ways than I can count. And on days when you forget again, because you will, on days when you slip back into old sentences, old spirals, old frequencies, you will not be back at zero. You will know how to come home. You will know how to sit on the edge of your bed, or stand in your kitchen, or pause on a sidewalk, and say, even with a tired voice, Lord, I've been complaining again. I've been seeing only what's missing. Help me remember. Help me see. Help me tune my heart to gratitude again. And heaven will meet you there, not with condemnation, but with the same gentle patience that has walked you through every step of this journey. Because this was never about you impressing God with your thankfulness. It was always about God freeing you from the prison of lack and bringing you back to the truth that your life, even with its unanswered questions, is already surrounded by evidence of his care. So as you move forward, keep practicing. Keep naming the small mercies. Keep remembering the late but right provisions. Keep thanking him for who he has been in every season you barely survived. That practice is not wasted. It is shaping you into a person who can carry more without forgetting the source, who can walk through less without losing sight of the giver, who can live each day not as a desperate victim of never enough, but as a beloved child who has learned to say, I may not have everything I want, but in Christ I am never walking empty-handed. And when your heart needs to be reminded again, when the world feels loud, when your mind feels heavy, when your gratitude feels thin, you are welcome to come back here, to return to this space, to the voice that speaks to you from heaven's side of the story, to the gentle rhythm of divine frequency. If this resonated with you, you're invited to stay close, to subscribe, to come back on the days when your heart slides into never enough, and let these words help you hear another truth, that even in the middle of your waiting, God is still moving, still providing, still tuning your life to the quiet, powerful frequency of gratitude. You are not forgotten. You are not empty. You are seen. You are held, and you are walking a story where the goodness of God has been far closer than you knew.